The roundtable public transport talks on Monday here in Canberra were the biggest example that I've come across in a long while that governments change their colours during election campaigns. They tell porkies, they say things that they know are not true just to get votes. Now, I guess we've all known that for a long time, but this was just a great example. The transport plan revealed on Monday made it clear that light rail was well and truly on the back burner. The light rail people weren't even invited to the forum when they finally got to have a look at the full document. They were not at all that surprised that the rail option was mentioned, but it was buried. Now, I don't think that's necessarily wrong, because I have serious questions about whether light rail would really fit Canberra. What is wrong is that 9 months ago, when the election campaign was in full stream, the ACT government was trumpeting light rail as the way of the future. In July last year, the Chief Minister listed light rail as a territory priority for Commonwealth infrastructure spending. In September of last year, Simon Corbell and John Hargraves attended an election forum put on by ACT Light Rail. They, along with virtually every other candidate there, talked up the light rail vision in Canberra. It was a light rail love-in. More than a dozen candidates spoke at the forum on that night, and there was only one dissenting voice. That was me. I was the only one who was actually brave enough to openly question, with all these light rail geeks there, whether light rail was the way to go for the ACT. Anyone who was at the light rail forum last year walked away from it believing that it was the way of the future for the territory. The Stanhope government had strategically announced on that very day that they'd appointed Price Waterhouse to put together an independent business case for light rail. Now, that business case was released in draft form, I think, in November, and then it was finalised and resubmitted earlier this year. It showed that light rail could potentially decrease Canberra's traffic congestion and commuting time, that it would reduce greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution, and that it would cost around $2 billion, although I think the light rail group question that costing. I want to know why it's virtually dropped right off the radar now. Surely all of that light rail chest beating just prior to the election wasn't just a vote-buying exercise? I'm astounded that government sentiment could turn full circle in 9 months. We'll talk with Jonathon Reynolds before this half hour's out. It is 22 after 7. Now, you heard us earlier in this half hour. We were talking about the Transport Forum in Canberra, which didn't involve ACT Light Rail. Jonathon Reynolds from ACT Light Rail's on the phone right now. G'day, Jonathan.
Good morning, Mark.
Were you disappointed at the fact that you guys weren't included in the forum and that light rail is seemingly on the back burner now?
Well, we're just one of several organisations that were somewhat disappointed that they didn't get an invite to the major event. The community councils, which are probably the peak bodies for each of the town centres in the ACT, didn't get an invite either.
No. And we were talking earlier on this program about the fact that, in the lead up to the election last year, the government was trumpeting light rail like there was no tomorrow. Yes,
they were. We were led to believe that they were seriously considering light rail. We saw the PwC, the Price Waterhouse Coopers study, and we've got cost-benefit analysis out of that basically said it was a goer, and they put a bid into Infrastructure Australia, and it seems to have died a very quiet death, so to speak.
So why is that? Have you? I know this transport plan was only put on the table on Monday, but have you made approaches to the ACT government to ask why?
Well, we haven't needed to actually approach the government to actually see why they failed in their infrastructure bid. The Infrastructure Australia were looking for what they call shovel-ready projects, which is projects ready to roll. And basically what the ACT government did instead was just put up some figures and say, well, we want to fund the whole network. We're not going to pay anything ourselves. Give it to us all, or we're not going to do anything. And of course, from a federal point of view, it didn't meet the grade.
So do you believe that they were serious in their pre-election mode last year, that they were genuinely serious about pushing light rail as a concept in Canberra, or was it just about getting votes?
Well, if you'd have asked me that question 9 months ago, I would have said they appear to be serious.
Because they did. I mean, I was there at that forum, and every single candidate except me. Every single candidate was trumpeting light rail, weren't they?
Very much so. I mean, if you ask us now, and it looks like they set up the whole process to fail, which is interesting because the Gold Coast, put in a bid for light rail to Infrastructure Australia, and they actually got their project up.
What's theirs worth, Jonathan?
Their project's approximately $900 million.
Right, so it's somewhat smaller than what was being considered for here in the ACT. How long does it run? Like, does it basically run along that coastal strip, or
the Gold Coast rail line is forecast to be 17 kilometres.
Right.
It's probably $900 million because they've got to buy back a fair swag of land to actually implement it, which we don't have to do in the ACT.
Yeah.
And, people will be saying, oh, well, it's a marginal seat up there. Well, interestingly enough, the federal seat of Moncrief is actually held by the Liberals with a safe margin of about 14%.
Really? Yeah.
So it's no different to the ACT being a safe Labor seat.
Yeah. So I mean, sometimes I worry about you guys that you get stuck on the whole light rail scenario, and that sometimes when there are genuine stumbling blocks in front of it, that you fail to see them. Do you still believe that light rail is by far and away the best public transport option for Canberra?
Well, from a sustainable point of view, very much so. We've seen with the successive studies that the government's been doing, the original KBR study back in 2004, which did the original costing, the PwC study, which was late last year, early this year, which actually did the cost-benefit analysis, and the latest study, which has come out, which has actually worked out for us and worked out for the Territory where the first stages of a light rail network needs to go. But in terms of a sustainable network, light rail is the way to go, because for a light rail vehicle is equivalent to 4 buses.
Yeah, I just still question whether we've got the population density, along those routes, and it'd be a mongrel if we spent $2 billion and no one used it, wouldn't it?
Well, the Gold Coast has got 500,000 people. We've got close to 400,000 people here in the ACT. I can't see much difference between the two, and in fact, the population density on the Gold Coast is actually less than the ACT.
Is it really?
According to Wikipedia, and I'll pull these figures out for you, the population density in the Gold Coast is 334 people per kilometre square. Here in the ACT, it's 428 people per kilometre square.
Yeah, but surely that population density figure for the Gold Coast must include areas of hinterland where there's nobody around. Like, there must be sections of the Gold Coast with population density far superior to that here.
Well, this is where the whole consultation process, where they're talking about a sustainable transport plan, becomes a bit of a furphy. What the government should have done is said, we're going to revamp the bus network once again. Yeah.
And it's got to work this time, because if it doesn't work this time, you might as well just throw them all away.
Every time they revamp the bus network, they basically get it wrong, and they get it wrong continually. What they should have just said, we're going to revamp the bus network, take it or leave it, this is what we're going to offer this time round, rather than saying they're actually putting out a sustainable transport plan. Because if you're looking at proper sustainable transport, with the time horizon of 20-odd years that they're looking at, you've got to include light rail. You can't just say it's buses only.
Jonathan, always a pleasure to chat. Thanks for coming on the program.
Great, thank you.
Jonathon Reynolds from ACT Light Rail. If you've got thoughts on that, 6255 4444 is the number.